information update. And we have with us in studio no other than Miss Leesha Delatie-Budair, Director General of STATIN, and she will be telling us how the labor force employed declined by 3,800, number of persons outside the labor force increased by 6,300 to 693,000. Hurricane Melissa devastated the agriculture, tourism, and the BPO sectors, and the unemployment rate fell from 3.5% in the fourth quarter of 2024 to 3.3% in 2025, fourth quarter of 2025. Good morning.
Dr. Simpson on the line.
Oh, okay, and we also have on the line Dr. Natalie Simpson, Acting Deputy Director General and Director of Surveys at STATIN. Good morning, welcome.
Good morning, thank you for having us.
It's our pleasure. Okay, so let us start with you, Ms. Delatie-Budair. Just remind our listeners, STATIN, what is the role of STATIN?
Thank you very much. So STATIN is the National Statistics Office for Jamaica. We are responsible for producing and coordinating official statistics on what is happening in the country. So we produce economic, social, and environment statistics, and these are the official numbers for the country.
Okay, thank you. And Dr. Simpson, could you tell us about surveys and how it is that STATIN goes about collecting data?
So we have a number of surveys, from household surveys to business surveys. The labor force is one of our household survey, as well as the Jamaica Survey of Living Conditions. This is where we actually pull a sample of households from dwellings, actually, within Jamaica, and visit those dwellings to administer questionnaires and ask a set of, standard questions that we would have already pre-tested.
Okay, so tell our listeners what you mean by the reference week. The reference week for the latest labor force survey was October 5 to 11.
So the labor force survey is a point-in-time measure. That means that it measures what is happening in the labor market at a specific point in time. Mm-hmm. So we've been doing quarterly labor force surveys for over 40 years, since the 1980s. And our labor force survey takes the format that we ask persons about their employment status and their labor market engagement during what we call the reference week. Now, for the October labor force survey, that reference week was the first full week of October, and that is what it has been since we started this new series. It was previously the last full week of the quarter, but when we changed the new series in 2024, we moved it to the first full week of the quarter. And what that allows us to do is to compare what is happening this year versus what was happening last year at the exact same point in time.
Okay.
So why would that be difficult at the end of the last week in the month? What was the problem? Why it was changed to the first?
So when we did our revisions to the labor force survey, we made several methodological improvements, and the adjustment to the reference week was one of the many adjustments that we made. What we found was that there was less of a cyclical pattern at the start of the quarter than what we were seeing at the end of the quarter. Because, for example, the October quarter has October, November, and December. Mm-hmm. And you can imagine that the end of December has a seasonal impact. Mm-hmm. And therefore, what we wanted to do was to have a more stable point in time that can give us a more consistent measure with a lower impact of the seasonality on the estimates. And that was one of the many improvements that we made when we adjusted the labor force survey in last year in 2024, which included things like the adjustment with the age, that the reference population. We also made adjustments in moving to some new standards, the 19th ICLS, the 20th ICLS, and the 21st International Conference of Labor Statisticians recommendations.
Okay. So, Dr. Simpson, when STATIN makes these adjustments, how is that communicated? Because I think the concern with the last labor survey is that it gave the impression that it was October to October, when really the methodology had changed, and it's just the first week of October that was reflected. And then, of course, because of the significant event that we had at the end of October, it would appear to be misleading. So how do we make that communication?
So what we did when we changed the series last year in January, leading up to the change, we had a number of stakeholder engagements. So we had different groups of persons, based on how they utilize the data, come in, and we did workshops to help persons to understand the changes that we were making and how the changes might impact how they use the data. We also did media engagements. So I think I also spoke on one of your programs about some of the changes. So once we released the findings, we talked about the changes and how these differences or what we have changed might impact how you interpret this data with the previous years. So we did a number of stakeholder engagements, including, like I said, academia, different researchers, the different ministries, departments, and agencies that utilize our data, and also with the media.
And if I could just add one thing, we are comparing the first week of October this year to the first week of October last year, so it's the same point in time.
No, I'm not saying what I'm saying. A previous report, like the previous year, where you actually used a different point in time.
And
it's a little bit misleading. Like, and then the report says October to October when we know all of October was not there.
So it's one of the things that we're trying to do, which is to improve the understanding of what the numbers mean. And it's one of the reasons that we were so happy to come and talk to you today, because we want to ensure that persons understand what the numbers mean and how to interpret them. Because we've always been talking about the reference week, but I think maybe that point may have been not as communicated as clearly as it needed to have been. So that's why we're here today.
Yeah, because the general public would get the impression that the survey covered October to October and makes no connection with the significant event that took place on October 28th. So people are saying, by the way, how is it that the agricultural sector, which is like 15% of labor force, agriculture, forestry and fisheries, 250,000 persons who are impacted in the tourism sector, persons who are impacted in the BPO sector, and STATIN is still telling us that the unemployment rate is 3.3%. A lot of people find that very shocking.
Understood. But what is important to understand is that the reference week was before the hurricane.
Precisely. But you never clarified that.
We actually did at the press conference. We were at pains to make it clear that the reference week was prior to the hurricane. But you can appreciate that an hour-long press conference to be condensed into a few minutes on the news, some things are going to get left out. But we were at pains to clarify that it is prior to the hurricane.
Okay. So in future, Dr. Simpson, do you believe STATIN should then, when we have these major changes, have something in the report that says, remember, our reference point has changed, and so just to remind persons that while you may see significant differences or the data may seem as if it doesn't make sense, such as at this point in time, so that people are aware that this is what has happened.
So just to reiterate, the October labor force that we're currently reporting on compares basically the same reference period. So it's the first week of October in 2024 compared to the first week of October in 2025.
We get that, but we're saying in prior years.
Correct.
Right. So
understood, and I'm getting there. So when it comes to making the changes, one of the things that we did was, for a series of press releases that we did, we included these summary notes about the changes that were made and the impact on the comparability of the data. So that's what we did for a series. What I'm hearing from you now is that maybe we need to continue this reminder until everybody understands that those changes were made, but now we're in a new series, and what we're comparing now is comparable to the same period of the previous year. So I hear you and I understand, but it is information that we published for a series of releases last year.
So, Madam DG, what would be the unemployment rate at the end of October? When is it that you're going to account for the devastation caused by Hurricane Melissa?
So there are many ways that we can account for the impact of Hurricane Melissa. The labor force survey gives us the supply side of the market from the household's perspective. Now, the impact of Hurricane Melissa, we're anticipating that we would see some of that in the January labor force. However, there are other measures that are available to monitor or to measure the impact on the various sectors. So there are demand side analyses that we are currently in the process of exploring. Of course, there are limitations to those demand side analysis because it would require us obtaining the information directly from the employers. Additionally, there are other damage and loss assessments that are being done by several government ministries, departments, and agencies, of which we are a part and we are supporting, to help to understand the true impact of the Hurricane Melissa on the labor market and on the economy. We do appreciate that this is a significant and important bit of information and that the public wants to understand what is happening. However, what we have to do is to ensure that we are clear and clarifying. The labor force survey is measuring a particular point in time. And it would not capture, the October labor force would not have captured the impact of Hurricane Melissa.
Right.
However, these other measures are what we are exploring to see how best we can provide the people of Jamaica with information on what exactly has been the impact of Hurricane Melissa.
So when is it that we're going to get those?
So those are being led by other MDs, so I cannot impose a timeline on them, so they would have to speak
Led
to
by
it.
the PIOJ.
Traditionally, the damage and loss assessment is led by the Planning Institute of Jamaica.
Okay. And so what role then, Dr. Simpson, would STATIN play? Because we understand the importance of the actual measurements of the data, not necessarily estimates or forecasts.
Can you say that again?
No, I'm just saying about those other things that would capture the impact of Melissa. What role would STATIN be playing in collecting that data? Because we want to understand, get the actual measurements, not estimates or, projections.
Right. Well, STATIN, like the DG said earlier, we have been collaborating with a number of agencies to do the damage assessment, to do work to understand the impact of Melissa. Some of the information that she spoke to earlier in terms of information that we're also going to explore will come from secondary information or administrative data sources. And so we have to be able to work out the details of those engagements and partnerships in order to be able to execute some of these estimations that we want to do. But just so that the public understands, it takes a little bit of time, it takes some partnership, it takes resources, and so we're working through those in order to be able to, provide the estimates and the numbers that people are looking for.
Yeah, additionally too, we have been providing support in terms of interviewers, data collectors, as well as tablet computers to support the damage and loss assessments that's happening, whether by the Ministry of Labour or ODPEM or other entities. We have also been providing technical support and guidance. So there are a myriad of ways that we are supporting the process, because as I said earlier, I do understand how important it is for us to understand how exactly Melissa impacted us, because it is significant.
All right, let's take a break for the time. So when we come back, we'll continue. And we want you to tell us, the level of uncertainty that this is generating, how this affects planning and moving the economy forward.
You're listening to Power 106 FM.
Conversation with our institute guest, Ms. Leesha Delatie-Budair. She's the Director General of STATIN. And over the phone, we have Dr. Natalie Simpson, Acting Deputy Director General and Director of Surveys at STATIN. And they're speaking with us about the labor force employed by declined by 3.8%. Number of persons outside the labor force increased by 6,300. Sorry, that was 3,800, not percent. And the labor force increased by 6,300 to 693,000. Hurricane Melissa devastated agricultural, tourism, and BPO sectors, and the unemployment rate fell from 3.5% during the fourth quarter of 2024 to 3.3% in the fourth quarter of 2025. Welcome back, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so Dr. Simpson, I think this one is for you, because Ralston is asking about the whole issue of data collection and having the general public having confidence in the collection and dissemination of information by STATIN.
So, just to remind your listeners that we follow international standards when it comes on to any one of the products or programs that we have at STATIN. The International Labour Organization provides the methodological guidelines for the labour force. And so anything that we publish, any data collection, any instruments that we do have align with the recommendations coming out of the ILO. So for the October quarter, we fielded our standard survey or survey instrument. However, because of by the time Melissa made landfall on October 28, we were already 2 weeks into data collection. So For the severely affected parishes, moving from St. Elizabeth all the way around to Trelawney in particular, we had to pivot because you understand the devastation. So you understand that persons are, they're in the middle of trying to understand what is happening and to pick up the pieces. And so in order to be able to get some information and to be able to publish the numbers, we fielded a short form or an abridged version of the questionnaire. This questionnaire primarily sought to get at labor force status, so whether employed, unemployed, or outside the labor force. And so to be able to do that comparison. Once the data came in, we had to then do a number of quality assessments to understand what is happening and to be able to say that the data that we're getting is robust and that it can be published. And so what we published or released last week was that information minus a few other indicators that we typically would publish because, of course, those questions were not on the short form. Mm-hmm. So we've done a lot of quality assessments and verification of the data to ensure that what we're reporting on is robust.
Okay. So DG, that you'll be able to assure the public that STATIN's data remain credible. Many people are losing confidence in STATIN, believe that there is interference in STATIN.
There is absolutely no interference in STATIN.
You say that categorically?
I say that categorically. It's one of the privileges that we've enjoyed as the National Statistics Office. Right. As a member state of the United Nations, Jamaica subscribes to the UN Fundamental Principles of Official Statistics. And freedom from political interference has been one of the core tenets that both political parties have respected over several decades of operations at STATIN. In fact, the press releases are only shared with the political directorate 1 hour prior to the official public release, so that they can prepare a statement or seek clarification. We do not in any way, shape or form consult around our methods. Our methods are determined exclusively using scientific principles, and periodically our international development partners, including the IMF, including the UN, including the ILO, do assessments of what we do. For example, when we updated our methodology on the labor force survey, we actually had an independent review from the International Labour Organization to ensure that our methodology remained robust. So absolutely, categorically, there is no political interference in the operations of STATIN.
Okay. I think, what we ask, and the Jamaicans, I think, will agree, is that when these reports are published, yes, you do the press release, but, we don't remember. People have so many things going on. But if it comes in the report, even as a footnote to say, please be reminded, then I think people wouldn't begin to question. Because we don't want people to lose faith in STATIN.
And I appreciate that. And as I said, that's one of the reasons that we were very happy to come here, because we saw that there was a misunderstanding, and we wanted to clarify. We wanted to ensure that your listeners are appraised of all of the circumstances around the numbers and how to interpret the numbers. These numbers do not reflect the impact of Hurricane Melissa.
That's clear. Now, what went wrong with the recent population census? Because many people are still trying to find out what went wrong.
So there are many things that happened during the recent population and housing census. And unfortunately, it was characteristic of the 2020 global round of population and housing census. We were conducting a census in a post-pandemic period, and societally, the appetite towards responding significantly changed. It is an issue that we are contending with even as we start preparations and planning for the next one as to how we're going to be overcoming it. However, thankfully, we had a lot of support from our international partners to assist us in using additional statistical techniques, some of which we would have been somewhat familiar with on other endeavors like the poverty maps, but some of which were new to us, to assist us in estimating for those areas that we did not cover. And that we had a press conference where we were very clear and transparent in terms of what we covered, what we did not cover, because we're a transparent organization, and if you have a question, you just ask us and we come and answer.
Good to know.
Yes.
All right. I think that's it.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you very much,
so
ladies.
Thank you. If I could just close by thanking
ma'am.
my field staff, the data collectors who executed the labor force under exceptionally trying circumstances. We had several staff members who themselves were impacted by the hurricane. Persons who lost their roofs, who lost everything, and they still went out in the field and collected data. And for that, we are forever grateful for them. And I just want to say thank you for the exceptional circumstances under which you executed the labor force in October.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was Leesha Delatie-Budair, and she is Director General of STATIN, and Dr. Natalie Simpson, Acting Deputy Director General and Director of Survey at STATIN. And they were speaking with us about the labor force, employed labor force declined by 3,800. The number of persons outside the labor force increased by 6,300 to 693,000. Hurricane Melissa devastated the agricultural, tourism, and BPO sectors, and the unemployment rate fell from 3.5 to 3.3% October, fourth quarter of 2024 to the fourth quarter of 2023.